Here we go. Come on. Easy, yep.
Today, we're going to talk about progressive overload. And I'm going to start off telling about my first experience with learning this concept. So, this is the first principle in exercise physiology, at least it should be if you want to make gains. Okay, so when I was 14 years old, 1995, I was training at the YMCA. And the YMCA was there. It was a lot of characters. There, pretty good gym, some good, pro wrestlers, bodybuilders. But then my dad's friend Steve Holl, who I was scared of, he was an elite power lifter. He invited me to come train with him, so I was super excited. So I didn't know what to think. I mean, I know everybody nowadays talks about, wants to hug and talks about it's an embracing, inclusive environment, or whatever people call it. This was not that. This place was like a gladiator-like hierarchy, where there's a clear pecking order, and luckily for me, Steve was at the top of this pecking order. So I go in there at 14 years old, and we're gonna train. We're gonna do bench press. I didn't know whether to shit or wind my watch, as they say. I did not know what to expect. So I'm just sitting there. Steve walks up to me drinking like one of those, it's like 90s, like pre-workouts called Rip Mass with the ephedrine in them. And he's just sitting there sipping on it. And I knew to keep my mouth shut, just go along with the plan. And, if he says jump, I just say how high kind of thing. So Steve stops. He's drinking his Rip Mass. He sort of squints his eyes and takes a cursory look around the gym. And he says, look at this place. The same people lifting the same weights, looking the same strength for the last 15 years. If you take one thing from away, he put his finger up like this. If you take one thing away from today, you gotta put more weight on the bar. That was my first experience with progressive overload. Okay, so let's go another personal experience before we get into a little bit of the history of it. 2016 in Okinawa, Japan. So at the same gym I just mentioned, Santa Barbara Gym Fitness, I had worked and stuff. So, after I started working out there at 14, like 15, I got a job there. So I used to have a bunch of free time up there, and I sure as hell wouldn't be studying the bullshit they're teaching at the school. I was studying my books by Fred Hatfield, of course. And I'm reading these books and having a great time. And, lo and behold, fast forward, I'm living my dream. I'm doing seminars with Fred Hatfield. It's the coolest thing in the world. And we're in Japan, outside of Iwakuni, at the famous, I don't know how to say it, but the famous, chicken on a stick place. Everybody goes to Iwakuni, Japan, knows they got the best chicken on a stick on that mountaintop. So we're at this place, and I bring up a mutual acquaintance of ours, and it was a fun time. Sake's a-flowing, the chicken's coming out, the beautiful golden Japanese beer. Hear that traditional Japanese music in the background. It was just a very pleasant, nice experience with my hero, working as an equal on a seminar. Things couldn't get better. So anyways, I just brought up this person's name because it had something to do with the business we were talking about. And Fred just kind of gives me that look he gives, and I'm like, did I say something? I'm like, fine enough. Why do you like that guy anyways? And I thought the guy was sort of weasel too, to be quite honest, but I didn't really dislike him. He's like, you know what his problem is? He's like, he's never fought tooth and nail. He's never entered the weightlifting priesthood and had to fight with every ounce of his body to put 5 more pounds on that barbell. He's never done that. So here, it was pretty interesting. The sort of epiphany in this whole thing was Fred Hatfield, the greatest sports scientist of all time, the smartest mind in strength training ever, is not a former professor at University of Wisconsin, is not saying, oh, he doesn't have this degree or that degree. He's saying the dude's never fought tooth and nail to put 5 pounds on the wall. So that is progressive overload. You go about the story of Milo of Croton, who the world champion wrestler from antiquity, way before the time of Christ. This guy was a world champion wrestler. He was a world champion wrestler for 25 years. And as legend has it, he had a baby bull. It was a calf. He picked up that calf every day until it became a bull. Then he carried that bull around the Coliseum on his shoulders. That is progressive overload. He's incremental, basically that's what Milo did. So we go back, my experiences, Milo, sort of the indirect, forefather of progressive overload. And that's what it is. So basically to get stronger, to get more muscular, your muscles have to go beyond what they're accustomed to, okay? So there's individual differences in that, of course, okay? Because how old are you? your sex, your muscle fiber makeup, your training history, age, training age, all that different stuff plays into it. And we could sit here and talk about that for an hour, but we're not. So there are individual differences. So you get what the point being is, with progressive overload, we want to hit that adaptation threshold. What stimulus do we need to make these adaptations happen without pushing that too far and going backwards and getting yourself hurt? So funny example is, there's some of these people online, and they're like really indignant about, I've heard a couple people they're indignant about not calling themselves strength and conditioning coaches. They're physical preparation specialists, because I guess that's the Soviet translation. And they'll be like, oh, I'm doing my latest greatest Soviet periodization scheme program I came up with. So I did one consultation with this guy, and I'm like, he's sitting there talking, science around. I'm having a master's degree in exercise physiology. This guy is like talking around my head. What the hell is this guy talking about? So he weighs 230. So I'm thinking like, and he's wanted to do the consultation with me about the bench press. So I'm thinking like, what do you bench press? I mean, and he said 245. So I said, okay, that's 529, because I did the kilos in my head. He's like, no, 245 pounds. This is someone from another country. I wasn't trying to be mean. This is somebody from another country that used kilograms. So I was not trying to be mean. I'm like, oh. I'm like, what the hell? So basically, point being, so this dude, I didn't really want to work with him. I didn't get that. So I said, why don't you do like 531 or something like that? Some kind of progressive overload program. So this guy scraps the Soviet so-called periodization program, goes to like the most basic program, and makes gains. So I see it all the time, these so-called schemes of all these different, like my heart rate variability is this and that, and like, like the translated version. No, dude, like at the end of the day, when they design this, they miss the most basic tenet. You have to progressively overload your training. You have to go, there has to be some way you do it. So sounds pretty easy. The most pure way to do this is simply add more weight on the bar, but eventually the buck's gonna stop. Here's why. If you bench press a bar right now, that's 45 pounds. You go up 5 pounds a week, that's 260 pounds a year. You do that for 3 years, 260 times 3, 780 out of the 45. You're at 825. You're now ahead of the greatest, strongest bench presser of all time, Julius Maddox. So obviously that's not going to work to just keep adding weight. But in the sense of progressive overload, that is the purest, best way to do it, is add more weight on the bar. But obviously you're going to run. So that's one way to do it. How else? And we're going to talk about how else you can do it. So besides increasing weight, you can increase total volume. What is volumes? Weight times sets times reps. Okay, so if within reason, hitting that adaptation threshold. If you're training to get stronger, and you could go, I'm going to bench press the bar for 100 sets of 10. I mean, that's a ton of volume, but it's not, because you're not over like 65% or so and hitting that adaptation threshold. So adding more volume to your training, it makes it more, you're neurologically, your muscular tissue is going to have to adapt to that, assuming you're not dragging the workouts out to 8 hours or something. So adding more volume is another way to overload your training, okay? Increase training frequency. This is a great strategy as a short-term strategy. A lot of times when we have a lagging body part, or just to, do something different and become neurologically more efficient at a particular lift. So lifts that are more complex, or clean and jerks, or snatches, they do better with increased frequency, okay? A lagging body part does better with increased frequency. People that are slow gainers, so slow gainers typically are predominantly more slow twitch muscle fibers, and they do, and because of that, it's a little harder for them to adapt. So they do better with increased frequency, and a lot of times when you have a lagging muscle group, even though you might be a fast gainer, primarily fast twitch, you're going to be more that direction in that particular lagging muscle group. So it thrives with increased frequency. So it definitely can be a short-term strategy, but for some of the slow gamers, it's actually a long-term solution. Increased training density. Density is simply how much work you do in a set amount of time. So I remember at one seminar Bill Kazmaier and I did together, he said, just bust out the stopwatch. What he means by that? Start timing how long you take between sets. If you do 4 sets of tricep extensions with 75 pounds and you rest 90 seconds between it, cut that into 75 seconds, then cut it down to 60 seconds the next week, then down to 45 seconds. You do. It's the same total work, but it's in a lot less time, making it more dense. Okay, so you can do it that way. You could do the same amount of you could do the same amount of or more weight in the same amount of time, doing it more dense. So just getting more volume done in the same amount of time, or using the same amount of time and doing more volume, that makes your training more dense and you're overloading. And finally, one of the simplest ways, just increasing reps. If you're bench pressing 225 pounds for 5 reps, then you go up to 6 reps, you've overloaded your training. It's not rocket scientists, and people, it's sort of like people always talk about, like, the joke is the year's 2022, finally the year, for fat loss, we can beat the calories in, calories out formula. It doesn't really work that way. Same way with this. Like, you can look for gimmicks and all this thing, but at the end of the day, you have to progressively overload your training.